strong.
Chapter 381, The Magic Bird in Tianshan, was he on purpose? Nanfang looked at Ye Fusion and thought, his words were indeed very provocative, persuading them to follow. However, what could they say even if it was intentional? They can give up at any time. Nan Yu was reconciled, and now that he has reached the limit of injury, I am afraid that I can no longer support him. How about them? How long can I support it? Can I really set foot on a mountain? Ye Fusion always said that he was fast, but how far in the mountain? Hua Kunking, how long? At this time, the holy fire taught Duo how to step behind Hua Kunking and talk to her. Hua Kunking had a trace of disdain in her heart, and this duo had always followed her. However, this time Tianshan was not the same as last time. He is also under extreme pressure. The desire to integrate into Tianshan seems to be recovering, and evil thoughts, he is almost at the limit. Shake it off. There is still a little distance, you give up. Although I stepped on the peak of Tianshan mountain last time, it was indeed step by step. This time it was more difficult. Hua Kunking looked back at the people. Okay. Duo was surrounded by dark light, his eyes and pupils were surrounded by evil flames, and there was a hint of darkness. He took a step forward, approached Hua Kunking, and then suddenly raised his hand and grabbed directly. Grabbing Hua Kunking's body, bent into the other arm. Hua Kunking's complexion changed. This is the second time. He was bathed in holy light, and a strong mental force attacked Duo head-on. The body wanted to avoid it, but saw that Duo's arm turned into a terrible one. The flame of the hand, the palm shattered, instantly surrounded Hua Kunking's body. Under the power of Tianshan, Hua Kunking was unable to dodge the melee attack, and the part of the arm near the shoulder was instantly bent. You follow me down the mountain. Duo said, his body flashing back, the pressure to go up the mountain is very high, and the opposite is the opposite. Let go. After King Kong's soul appeared behind King Kong's spirit invaded Duo's spirit. Boom. Duo's eyes and pupils seemed to be surrounded by dark flames, bathed in divine fire, and wrapped around them. Her cultivation is in the heaven realm, and Hua Kunking is only in the middle of heaven. How can he compete? I'm going down the mountain first. Dwarf grabbed Hua Kunking's body and turned around. This sudden change stunned others, it was too fast, everything happened just for a moment. The plan is planned, if you can't get to Tianshan, you will take Hua Kunking directly. Ye Fusion took a step back and wanted to get down, his eyes narrowed, showing coldness. It's not about you, keep going up the mountain. Harlan Thailand showed a very wild breath, like a humanoid monster. His eyes and pupils were very strange, looking at Ye Fusion. The invasion of evil thoughts awakened his wildness and wanted to continue ascending. In this short moment, Duo gradually brought Hua Kunking down. At this time, Ye Fusion saw Hua Kunking's beautiful eyes staring at him, and his eyes seemed to be asking for help. He knew that Ye Fusion had the ability to save him. Try again, if that doesn't work, give up. Nanfang also said to Ye Fusion, although he is a bit stigmatized to teach Duo, but he is much more lazy. Ye Fusion glanced at the people and nodded, okay. When he turned and continued to walk, however, his mind shrouded Tianshan at this time, he saw Duo carrying Hua Kunking down, the speed down the mountain was unlimited, it was very fast and the evil thoughts weakened, but Duo the evil fire in the eyes did not go out, but became more and more intense. Burnt. Looking at the pure and neat woman in front of him, he showed greed in his eyes. This woman can take the teaching of the flames, and she will be the one in the future. Animal. Ye Fusion's heart was cold. At this time, within the Tianshan mountains, there was a terrifying black shadow, and the endless dark magic surrounding the Tianshan mountains turned into a demon bird ghost image, shrouding the darkness. But at this time, suddenly opened a pair of eyes in the darkness, the eyes are boundless, like the disciples of the demon bird. At this moment, the endless will on the Tianshan mountain seems to flow to the side, rushing to this cohesion in the shadow of the demon bird. Tianshan's will and evil will form two terrible forces, mutually restrain each other, and then a pair of demon disciples shoots a cold mang. Oh! The body emerged from the air like darkness and lightning, trembled, and rushed straight out of the Tianshan mountains. Endless magic roams around the body. Just for a moment, on the peak of Tianshan mountain, an enormous magic bird appeared. Figure. The magic bird plunged down and headed straight down Tianshan mountain, as if it was a dark lightning, reaching its limit. At this time, Ye Fusion and his team were still climbing hard. Why is the evil mind stronger? Chu Chang said, his graceful body shrouded in light, but then suddenly he felt that the evil intent was rising in madness. Not only him, but several other people also felt it, a little confused. Go on. Suddenly looking up, Nan Feng saw the demon bird diving and covering the sky. His face turned pale and instantly ugly. Go. Nan Feng did not hesitate. At this time, there is still an idea to go to Tianshan Mountain. He turned and ran away. This magic bird is the magic bird that comes to their mind. In Tianshan, it really exists. Some people did not hesitate and fled back, but the magic birds were too fast, and they died, and they could only sacrifice the gods of the powerful magic weapons. The huge monster birds swept, like the last days, one by one flew up, spat blood into the air, and then fell to the ground and still fell in the snow. However, the demon bird swooped down, as if it had no interest in them. Ahem. Nan Feng coughed up blood and painted the snow red. At the time it was too scary. He looked back at Ye Fusion and saw Ye Fusion falling in the snow. He couldn't help but coldly ask, "Mixed things, why didn't you mention about the magic bird in Tianshan? I didn't see Tianshan last time." Ye Fusion opened his mouth to Nan Feng. "You're an idiot." Nan Yu was more injured. He couldn't stand it before. The sharp claws of the magic bird just hit him directly in the chest. He wouldn't die unless he had a gun guard. Chu Changmi's eyes also glanced at Ye Fusion. Nothing was said. Nobody wanted an ending like this. It was even sadder than last time. "I am afraid that Tianshan will not leave at all." Ye Fusion sneered. Since these people went to Tianshan, he would accompany them and let them feel good. Of course, he couldn't really let these people die here. Otherwise, he and Hua Kangking are still alive, and the others are dead. Can Wangzu's great army be spared? At the waist of Tianshan Mountain, Duao did not continue down the mountain, but took Hua Kangking to a remote corner of Tianshan Mountain and injured Hua Kangking. This woman's resistance is also troublesome. In the snow, Hua Kangking lay there, her face pale. She never expected to experience such a thing. The evil fire of Duo's eyes and pupils still lit up, staring at Hua Kangking on the ground, stepping forward to the front row. "Your constitution is very suitable for me. Rest assured, I will bring you back to the Holy Fire religion in the future. One day, you may become Holy Fire Teach Sun's sons. Go." There was a murderous idea in Hua Kangking's beautiful eyes, and Keen Han appeared again, clearly not wanting to be humiliated. "Why? There is a godlike fire behind Duao, and the terrifying flame will fall on Hua Kangking's body without being disturbed by the sound of the piano." The clothes on Hua Kangking's body started to burn in the blizzard, revealing white arms. "You won't do it," Hua Kangking said firmly. "Even if you want to die, I won't let you go." Duo's evil thoughts were completely ignited and he heard tears in the corners of Hua Kangking's eyes. Seeing Duo step forward step by step, he despaired. The Duo smiled evilly, and at this moment, he suddenly felt something, coldly, who? Turning around, he saw a strong wind screaming in the distance, snow sweeping across the sky, and a light of darkness spreading out. Then he saw a terrible monster bird. Wild animals. Duo's face changed instantly. Seeing the magic bird running at such a fast pace, he grabbed Hua Kangking's body and quickly retreated. The magic birds descended, their wings swept, and they hit the two people instantly. The two corpses parted directly and fell to the ground. Duao glanced at Hua Kangking who had fallen in the distance, and he was not reconciled, but at this moment, he saw a magical bird staring at him, and then flashed straight towards his body. Animal. When Duo saw the magic bird approaching him, he took out a maggot and crushed it. His speed soared to the mountainside like the wind. He was about to leave the Tianshan scope. When the magic bird is killed, its wings will immediately catch up with Duo. His face was pale and he sacrificed an edict that exploded instantly under the flames and turned into a fire god of war guardian. Bang! The demon claws were torn apart, the fire warlord exploded, and the terrifying power caused Duo to become Zhenfei. He spat out blood in the void, and used this power to frantically retreat and travel with the wind. The magic bird continued to move forward, but saw that Duo had reached the edge of the Tianshan Mountains, and rushed down to see that he was going out of the Tianshan Mountains. Suddenly, the demon bird's body stopped and did not continue to chase. His body crossed the arc and turned around instantly. When passing by Kangking King, narrowed eyes glanced at him, and then swept straight at him. "Thank you." Hua Kangking looked at the magic bird. She vaguely guessed something. The meaning of Tianshan is controlled by Ye Fusion, and this magic bird is the same. Dwarf walked down the mountain and was so embarrassed that he returned to the feet of Tianshan. Seeing the wolf howling at Duo, the people of the Holy Fire asked, "What happened?" "Nothing, there is a beast on Tianshan Mountain, which was attacked by it." Duo responded lightly, and the evil thoughts in his eyes and pupils slowly converged and scattered. Where is my lady? The worldly strongman stepped forward and asked, and the people who responded to the Nanshan on Yinglong's back also asked. I don't know, we're separated. Du Ao said, looking at the crowd. He seemed to be looking for Qin Yu and Hua Kangking's family, and found that those people were not here. In the distance, a line of figures came to Tianshan, traveling with the dragon. The line-up in this line is very scary. Qin Yu, the Dongba patriarch, and his wife, Lu Nanshan, the lord of Fuyunjian, the lord of the Suspension King's palace are here. Chapter 382, Peak Game. Above the first mountain of Shushan, the clouds are surrounded by fog, and a pavilion stands on the top of the mountain. Here you can see the whole of Shushan with a beautiful view. At this time, two old men were playing chess in the stall. He ran as the dean of the academy and Master Kotangdo Bailishu is standing on the side. He is a little strange, this kind of scene is very rare. It was the first time he saw teacher and uncle playing chess. What kind of wind is blowing today? How can I feel abnormal? I haven't played against each other for a long time. Brother, your chess skills are becoming more and more beautiful. You had less spirit when you were young. It was natural. Descendants have secrets and hidden majesty. You have a gentle child, but you are in charge of the overall situation. Over the years, your mental arithmetic abilities have become stronger. The page header should be fluttering. This is not mental arithmetic, this is momentum. Mr. Du shook his head. You are in the wild and want to fulfill your wish, so what is the situation now? The dean looked at him scornfully. Why is brother so upset? Master Du laughed. How many years have you trained so far? How many years do I have? Sooner or later, I want to go to find a path to destruction. Is it so difficult for me to give this position to you? He said, even if you don't want to, your great disciple, why did you let him go down the mountain? For your sake. Bailishu, who was nearby, heard a heartbeat between the two of them. There was a rumor that his teacher and uncle strengthened his students to go down the mountain to make a case instead of staying in the academy. The teacher was very dissatisfied with this. The real reason turned out to be the teacher wanted to find someone to replace him, and the uncle didn't want to, so he thought of Taoist. This is very surprising. Brother, do you see where I fit in to be the dean? Master Du laughed, lazily. Besides, there are some things you don't know. Dean Xiao looked at Mr. Du, and finally sighed. He naturally understood the reason why his teacher and brother refused to take over this position, but this jerk didn't let Dao Shang's disciples take over. He was very sad, very angry, and he did not have much time. Although the practitioner has a longer lifespan, he is not immortal, he is not a sage, and still has his own limits. Only by breaking through could his life be extended, so he wanted to leave the eastern wasteland and go outside. Looking for opportunities, practicing behind closed doors in Donghang, with his talent, he can't understand the way of the sage, and can't take that last step. I know, Big Brother, you are willing for me. I also think that when all this is done, Big Brother will leave without a care, but. Mr. Du shook his head with a smile. If you want to put your ideas into practice in Donghang, it will definitely violate the interests of others. It can't be as simple as you think. Dean Xiao said. He understood what his brother wanted to do. Yes, it is very difficult to change the desert. Mr. Du shook his head. He looked away, and said, it's still here. Hearing his words, Dean Xiao also looked up, and saw the sky roaring above the sky. When the sound of the Yin dragon came, it trembled. At the peak of Shushan, many people looked at the sky, and they saw a true dragon swallowing the clouds and spitting mist, and descending from the clouds and fog. The golden dragon is very big and majestic. Behind the golden dragon, there are two figures, the figure standing in front of the demon dragon wearing a dragon crown and robe, and majestic. Hiran was the most powerful figure in the eastern wasteland, the king of Qin. On the left and right sides of the Qin king, there were still two old men standing in an unexpected breath. In addition, many people appear in the void around him, but they are the figures of the Supreme Prince of the Four Forces Alliance, and now they are descending on Shushan. Suddenly, Shushan trembled, and every figure rose into the air, like a close enemy. Qin dynasty. Finally the army came to Shushan. The Qin king stood behind the demon dragon, his eyes pierced through space, landed on the pavilion on the first mountain of Shushan, looked at the two people playing chess, and laughed loudly. Qin came to call Dean Xiao and Mr. Du. Go. Dean Xiao looked up coldly, he hoped that Qin Wang could go as far as possible. At this moment there was a slight worry in his mind. Brother, since the guests have arrived, there is no reason to follow them. Master Du smiled indifferently and looked at the Qin king clearly. Please. Okay. The Qin king nodded with a smile and walked in the void. The two elders followed, and the demon dragon remained in the void and circled around. The leaders of the Shushan Mountain, Dosheng Mountain, and the strong people of Wanguzong all rose into the air, staring indifferently at the empty figures, forming a state of confrontation. The fairy watching the moon came to the Shoshan pavilion and saw it from the distance of the pavilion. He looked at the two old men beside the King King, his eyes were deep and his body was restrained, but he felt very dangerous, and they seemed to be very old, and if they practice in this world, they will still grow old, then they must really be monsters who have lived for many years. King Kan's figure fell to the ground, saluted Master Du, said, Master Juan's name has never been seen, and he came here to harass me today. No wonder. His words were sincere, not hypocritical, but from the heart. In the name of Master Du, anyone who does not admire the 3 points in the eastern wasteland. There were 8 disciples in the thatched hut. The names of the first 3 people move east. Anyone can stand alone and stand on the eastern desert. Although the other disciples were still growing, they had shown extraordinary talent. Over time, maybe no better than Sword Saint Bad Guy being able to select such disciples and train them in such a way, even if Master Du really didn't understand the practice, he was still a legend. In addition, Keen Wang naturally did not believe that Du did not understand the practice. The two next to Keen Wang also looked at Mr. Du as if they wanted to feel something from him. Thank you. Du laughed casually. He naturally noticed that although Keen Wang brought many strong people today, the suzerainian Dongba couple and several important figures did not come. With a slight smile, he naturally understood what was happening. President Xiao and Mystic Xia are very good at yazing. I know quite a bit about the game of chess. Could Mysticky be interested in the game? Keen Wang said to Master Du. Help. Master Du reached out, Dean Xiao looked at him, his beard fluttering. Brother, Master Du shouted to Dean Xiao. Dean Xiao was still glaring at him. Brother, the guest is a guest. Master Du said again. Dean Xiao stood up reluctantly, then walked to the side, glanced at the Keen people indifferently. Troublesome Dean Xiao. King Keen nodded at Dean Xiao, then sat opposite Du, returned to 0 and started from 0. Above the Shushan Mountains, the Academy and the Keen dynasty brought people's eyes to the situation in the Shoshan pavilion, and their hearts were turbulent. One of the most powerful figures in the eastern wasteland, the legend of the mysterious and lowly thatched hut, the two actually played against each other in Shushan. They all know that this gameplay, the chessboard, affects all of the East's shortcomings. Master Wen heard that he is the brother and sister of the Academy, but an elder. Master Keen asked first. Keen Wang admitted. Du nodded gently, and dropped it casually, effortlessly. Keen Wang smiled, and then fell in love. On Mount Shu, it seems to be very quiet, but also has a slight feeling of depression. The sound of the chessboard falling on the first mountain seems to be very clear. Mr. Arbitrary random, unconscious, but the layout is complete, extraordinary. Keen Wang laughed, his voice dropped, the piece fell in his hand, and Dean Xiao saw the scene with a sharp glance. The layout of the classmate is complete, and the King of Keen presses step by step. Mr. Du smiled and kept calm. The two were tit for tat, and gradually, on the body of the Keen King, an invisible aura appeared, covering this space. Master is a legend, so why stick to one side? One of the sons of the Keen King fell, and on the chessboard, there was a real dragon screaming in anger, devouring everything. Make a plan and move later. Master Du smiled, still settling in a random place. There is the potential for a siege in the area. Once the siege is released, it can respond to the overall situation and form an unstoppable trend. The King King held the chess piece with his palm suspended in the air, and the momentum of his body faintly gathered into the shape of a dragon, as if temporarily trapped. Finally, his fingers fell, the real dragon went into the sea, and he wants to surround the opponent at all costs. No matter what the consequences are. Master Du shook his head, then sat down. He never thought about it, as if everything was hidden in his chest and stomach. However, the pawn held on. Master of the overall layout, if the situation is successful, there is no way to stop it. If you don't want to be successful, you will succeed. Keen Wang said weakly. He looked at the chessboard with an invisible pressure. The chess player fell and rushed into the opposing line. Break the balance. You don't stay too long. If you lose, there's no turning back. Why not? Said Mr. Du again and continued to fall. Shushan, everyone around them listened to the words of the two of them, and the hidden secret seemed to understand. Their chess pieces are on the chessboard. This chessboard is not the whole East. King Kan's eyes froze and he stared at the chessboard. When Du fell, the situation changed suddenly, and he was always on the defensive side. After the sun fell, there was a momentary intent of the sword swinging away. Is currently in danger, as if to be straightened out. Will King still insist? Du asked. King Khan's heart trembled and his fingers trembled slightly. He stared at the chessboard, and then put the ball down, forming an end-to-end siege. Like two true dragons, one of them wins. After Tianshan, the Tianshan battle will end here. No matter how hard it is to obsess. Du shook his head. He held the chess pieces, and fell one word at a time. One of the besieged battlefields suddenly changed, and the connection between the two dragons was severed. The Battle of Tianshan. If you want to retreat from your whole body, I am afraid that this is difficult. Du said idly. Chapter 383, Peak. At the foot of Tianshan mountain, the wind blew and snowflakes flew. In the distance, there was a mighty figure, and many people looked around, their hearts trembling slightly. Prince King Yu of the Qin dynasty, the Dongba Zong husband and wife, Lu Nanshan, Fuyunjian Zong, lord of the suspended king's palace, and several old men from the Qin dynasty and Dongba Zong. Such an overbearing formation descended on Tianshan and headed straight for the direction below Tianshan, where the three strongest disciples in the hut were all there. Donghang will change. The long-awaited battle will break out today. I didn't expect that the place of battle was not in the academy or the Qin dynasty, but in Tianshan. But why is King Qin not here? Dao Sheng, Zhu Gehui, and Jiu Dongyu saw the other party coming, standing proudly in the void, and flashing a cold light in their eyes, they seemed to be following them. On the other hand, the top-level strongmen of the desolate state are showing an interesting view, and the eastern desert doesn't seem so calm. It seemed to be able to appreciate the level at which the peak strongmen in the eastern wasteland were at. The holy sword was beside them, the crowd was retreating, and they were far away. King Yu and others took advantage of the dragon to stand in the air, and when the battle broke out, they naturally avoided the battle. So, in the snow, only 3 people stood there quietly, as if isolated by the rest of the world. The snowflakes fluttered and the 3 were straight. The majesty of the sword, Zhu Hui cold and proud, Jiu Dongyu sharp. This was the first time that the 3 disciples of the Lord stood together and fought together. Many people were excited, the 3 of them were legends of the eastern wasteland, and the target that many people were chasing. However, this time they faced too many opponents. Terrible, the Lord of Dongba and his wife, the Lord of the Fuyun sword, and the Lord of the overgeared King Palace, who are not giants in the eastern wasteland. How did the 3 great disciples in the hut fight? Looks like someone has a bad memory, or the whip didn't hurt the last time. Zhu Hui smiled coldly, and cold eyes glanced at King Yu. Suddenly, King Yu's face was extremely embarrassed. The final battle in heaven was the shame of his life. Looking at Zhu Hui below, Baishu Shengshu standing like a white fairy in the white snow, King Yu said, "The 2 disciples in the cottage are very handsome. It is said that they are still alone, so it is better to marry me in the Qin dynasty. I happen to be married. Missing one." As he said, he looked at Dongba suzerain and others around him. Don't start with too much weight, lest Tang be beautiful. King Yu's heart is cold, and in order to get rid of the shame of the former Tianshan mountains, he must put Zhu Hishan under him and be ridiculed by him, and he will use his life to repent for the battle. Madame Yu Xiao glanced at King Yu indifferently, feeling a bit repulsive in her heart, and she was not humiliated like she was, but she thought it was a shame to come back this way. On the day of the battle in Tianshan, King Li died and King Yu was tortured, completely destroying King Yu's previous pride. His mentality changed and was somewhat distorted. He can also be seen by his daughter Hua Kangking, who wants to approach the desert country. Instruction. Today, King Yu had no choice. However, he did not say anything, and Dong Hazong did not back down. King Yu's words fell, Jiu Dongyu emitted an extreme sharp breath, shook him, and shook towards King Yu. When Zhu Hui heard King Yu's words, he suddenly laughed, wanting him to become a clan. With his hands on his waist, a crackling sound came out, and a long whip in his hand. Zhu Hui's arm trembled, the whip turned, and trembled, white lightning pierced the void, the sky, lightning flashed and thundered, and endless thunderous light flowed on the whip, rolling towards the void, during which time the whip seemed to have turned into a thunderstorm. In order to engulf the sky, every ray of thunder in the storm contains the power of destruction. If involved in a storm, it is absolutely impossible to get out. Retreat. The distant person has retreated to a very far away place, but feels that the body of the storm is receding again, and it is still not safe. Zhu Gavi's random movements had enveloped the vast space under the pressure of destruction. Among them, it was terrible. Next to the Tianshan mountains, the great powers of Wangzhou saw this scene, and it seemed that they had really underestimated the strength of the academy. This woman is very strong. This thunder spell is definitely a super prince level spell. Above the sky, King Yu and the others suddenly became dignified. Only one Jujhui spell bloomed, making people feel terrible. This thunder spell bloomed with the whip of the sage weapon, covering the entire world for a while. The power of thunder, the thunderstorm that swept through them all came to them, to drown them all. Sect Master. King Yu held the dragon weapon in his hand, but looked at Sovereign Dongba next to him. Last time, he had proven that he was no match for the master of the two lodges. Dong Hua Zong was a force on par with the Qin dynasty and the academy. Hua Zongju's strength is beyond doubt. Hua Zongju looked down, holding a scepter, an earth scepter in his left hand. Dong Hazong is named after a spell, and Hua Zong is a master of martial arts. When he held the earth stick, the entire space was enveloped with an invisible heavy pressure. A loud rumbling sound came out, and the light of the earth gathered wildly. Around his body, it turned into a huge endless earth meteorite, like a mountain, endless, and then fell furiously into the storm. Rumble. The world roared, the battlefield space became a real apocalypse, the thunder and meteorites collided, and under the endlessly shining purple thunderlight, the meteorite was constantly torn and shattered, but the meteorite image was never endless, and the endless stream was facing downwards. Go and fill the storm. Suddenly Jujui's rotating arm pointed directly at the void. At this moment, a storm lashed the sky and no longer gathered. Donghazong's suzerain's shirt fluttered, his hair fluttered, and his wand pointed down. For a moment, a terrifying gravity gripped him like blocking a thunderstorm. Suddenly, there was a long whip from the storm. Sweeping away the past, curled up into an empty figure. Master Hua Zong's face remained unchanged. A sacred imaginary shadow appeared behind him. The beach is high and majestic like a god. The earth stick stretched out. A huge palm appeared in the void in an instant, covering the sky towards the long sky. The whip shattered, blocking the void within. The whip was like a snake, and suddenly turned towards where King Yu was. King Yu's figure flashed towards the side in a golden light, and then he saw the whip rolling towards the dragon. Long Xiao exploded, and the whip instantly wrapped around his huge body, and then a thunderstorm reappeared, and Zhu Gabi's arm was fierce. A quiver, the brilliance of the true roar of the dragon in the thunderstorm suddenly turned into the sword of the thunder god, and the monster dragon was cut into countless pieces. The demon dragon roared and roared. The crowd in the distance looked at the scene and felt their hearts tremble violently. It was a prince-level dragon with extremely strong defense and a terrifying physical body. However, the dragon was caught under the whip Jujhui directly severed. You can imagine what terrible consequences thunder will have if it is the flesh and blood of the people on the list. At this time, the Lingshan sword bloomed, and then saw the Yunjian Cloud Master stepped forward, turned into a sword light and fell directly into the sky. He shook the light with the famous sword. The sword came out, the silver light was washed out, and the cold light for 9 days, killed Jujhui who attacked King Yu directly. Oh! The terrifying sword bloomed, and then saw the body of the sword like lightning. The sword pierced the gap, splitting everything, cutting the silver sword light, all the way, kill Ha Ruoshui, the master of the Fuyun sect. At that time, the sword master fought on Haiyan Shui in the Fuyun Janzong battle. Now, the two are fighting again. The reputation of the sword master in the eastern wasteland could even be said to be above Ha Ruoshui. However, in this battle, Ha Ruoshui wielded a famous sword, but there was no magic weapon in the hands of the sword master. At the moment when they fought, the heavens seemed to split apart, and swords were meant to cross between heaven and earth. Even if they were far apart, they still felt extremely dangerous. Dosheng had no weapons, but chose close combat and hit him head-on. Jiu Dongyu blinked and walked straight towards where King Yu was. He was very fast and turned into a ghost. Clang! A loud sound came out, and the leader of the Palace of Suspended Kings held the golden bell, pressed it, and directly blocked Jiu Dongyu's body. The golden bell spun in the void, with a terrifying courage inside. It's a sage-level weapon again, but also in the king's palace. Many people trembled. Perhaps it was excavated from the ancient tomb of the Qin dynasty, and now in the hands of the lord of the king's palace, the sword of the god of the cloud god may be the same. 3 giants, magic weapons in hand, and King Yu, Madame Yu Xiu, and Lu Nanshan did not participate in the battle. No wonder King Yu directly killed them here, and the victory ticket is in their hands. Many people talk about it, but the 3 disciples in the hut are really terrible. In order to deal with them, the Qin dynasty sent such a battle and borrowed an instrument. Look at Sword Master. At this time, several people exclaimed that the sword battle between the Sword Master and Ha Ruoshui made the void seem to be torn apart. The 2 men's bodies became higher and higher, and they could barely see them. Swords that are still seeping into the world. But at this time, the movement of the sword master suddenly slowed down, but the sword intent in his body became stronger and stronger, a handle appeared in his hand, every movement was natural, pulling the power of heaven and earth like a sword intent. When it came out, there was a straight cold light in the sky, and the sky seemed to be split in two. The famous sword Yogang in Haruo's hand was cut wildly, but it was still torn apart under the sword, making Haruo Shui's body explode. See if you dodge it, it looks really embarrassing. You go and help him. King Yu didn't know when he came to the overgeared King Palace Lord, and he opened his own weapon to block Jiyu Dongyu. Jiyu Dongyu was as famous as him, having defeated Lu Nanshan at first, but now he wielded a magic weapon. Okay. The king's main body of the king's palace flashed, and the golden bell in his hand was directly pressed towards Dosheng. Watching the battle in the air, many people were silent for a while. The masters of the two main halls, the Cloud God sect and the monarch of the suspended kings, wield magic weapons to fight against the sword master. Chapter 384, Yamashita. King Yu holds the golden dragon rifle and is afraid of the terrifying golden cold light. He's very sharp. He looked at Jiyu Dongyu and looked indifferent. The three big disciples in the thatched huts trembled in the east, and today is their last day. A father was held back by the academy, no one dared to come to the rescue. After the battle on this side ended, they went to destroy the academy and the thatched huts to exterminate the desert east. King Yu's body moved, turned into golden lightning, and shot out of the air. Before that person arrived, golden lightning had been released above the dragon gun, killing Jiyu Dongyu below like a sharp knife, flooding the space. Jiyu Dongyu looked up, his eyes were sharp, and the pair of pupils expressing delusion became very strange. The next moment, King Yu's body is reflected in his pupils, as if everything is under his control. King Yu only felt that there was a ghost in his spiritual will. It seems that the war god killed him, made him very uncomfortable, his heart was colder, and the spiritual master was annoying. This kind of mental attack, in addition there is no other way than mental resistance, and evasion is impossible. Oh! The dragon gun swallowed the shocking tip and killed it in midair. The golden lightning shattered the space, but a ghost image appeared. Jiyu Dongyu gave birth to the glory, the shape changed, and instantly changed from the original. The ground disappeared, the dragon gun exploded in the snow, a loud sound erupted, the ground was penetrated, and a terrible dark hole appeared. King Yu swept his spear, his body rotated with the spear, and the golden lightning went in the same direction as the gust of wind, where Jiyu Dongyu was. Bum! The golden lightning pierced the void, but still only hid the afterimage. Jiyu Dongyu's body was too fast. He fluttered white, his feet were bright, holding the French seal in his hand, and the world resonated around him. There are ancient words hidden around it. Line characters in 9 characters. 9 words Taoist method, 1 word for 1 method. King Yu's face is ugly. He slowly turned around and looked at the figure standing opposite the opposite, and said coldly, "You just dodged." Jiyu Dongyu looked at him, King Yu just felt stiff, his mind seemed to be tied up, and the war ghost in his head was killed towards him. Long Yin's voice came out, and on King Yu's body, a virtual shadow of a real dragon appeared, surrounded by Kowloon, dazzling and incomparable. Among the Kowloon, there is a sacred golden dragon, which is his soul and soul. King Yu carried a long gun in his hand, Long Xiao in the sky, and he attacked at the same time. He stepped out and shot, and the golden lightning instantly cut and broke the void. However, Jiyu Dongyu's body is still not hit, Jiyu Dongyu is too fast. Oh! 9 characters surrounded him, with the illusion of a very bright figure appearing behind Jiyu Dongyu, bathed in the light of 9 characters. Currently Jiyu Dongyu looks like a fairy body. The lines floated in the air, printed on the body, and the path between heaven and earth resonated, and many ancient characters appeared. Then, Jiyu Dongyu's body went back and forth in the void, and the vast space gave off many shadows, as if he couldn't clearly distinguish what is right and what is wrong. A phantom fell right in front of King Yu, and he raised his hand as a shot and instantly crushed it. Furthermore, endless virtual shadows continued, attacking King Yu wildly. After the real dragon rod behind King Yu, he saw the birth of the supreme power between heaven and earth, and deciphered the ghost of the war god. The 9 war gods stood proudly, surrounded by ancient characters, and could not fight against the demon dragon. It's strong. The crowd standing in the distance charged into the stormy sea. Too strong, the 3 Kotang disciples faced giants of various powers. The second disciple of Zhu Hui is like a fairy, competing against the king of Dongwa. The big disciple fought with the 2 swordsmen, and the third disciple Jiyu Dongyu flew up against King Yu who was holding a magic weapon. However, there was still no shot from one side of the Qin dynasty. Madame Yu Xiu stared at the battle between suzerain and Zhu Hui. As husband and wife, they obviously didn't want the two to deceive the next generation. After all, Zhu Hui said to them, can only be considered a junior. Yu Nanshan didn't take any pictures either. He was watching the battle between Qin Yu and Jiyu Dongyu. At that time, he had fought Jiyu Dongyu in the Dongqin Academy. However, Jiyu Dongyu was much stronger than last year. He has entered the state of a first-class prince, and at the same time, he has realized the ability of a sage. Although it is only an entry, it is still equivalent to metamorphosis. As for the other strong people, they are in the Holy Sword battlefield in the void and ready. If Ha Ruoshui, the master of the Fuyun sword, and the master of the suspended king's palace, couldn't do it, they would besiege together. In this battle, they are bound to win, and they will never let the three great disciples of Kotang return to the academy. The strong people of a desert looked at the battlefield here in amazement. The strength of the three disciples from the college shocked them, and they were all aware of the wise intentions. If they went to a desert with them, they would almost certainly enter the world of sages in the future. Totally unexpected. Duao looked at the battlefield. He noticed that the strength of the Chinese ruler and Madame Yu Xiu was very strong. If he found out what he had done to their daughter, what would happen? But he is not worried. He carries a lot of powerful flames, not to mention, even if the other party knows, how dare he treat him. In the Qiankyu temple camp, the Buddha has now returned, and he looks at the battlefield with a sneer. This battle was exactly the storm caused by what he said that day. And he thought, if the storm is more chaotic, can it involve a bigger storm, so that the top forces in the desert countries will also be involved? In the end, both the Qin dynasty and the academy lost both wounds, and they were even expelled from the eastern wasteland. In this way, from then on, in the eastern desert, there would only be three top-level armies, Qiankyu Temple, Dao Dezong, and Ji family. What are you thinking about? At this time, towards the Qiankyu Temple, a monk asked, looking at the blinking eyes of the Buddha. Disciples are thinking, when can I preach in the eastern wasteland in Qiankyu Temple and be worshipped by the world? Buddha said. Fordo his destiny, there is no need to covet the enshrinement of the world. Destiny comes from the Buddha, fate does not, why should you force it? The monk said with his hands together, you idiot, you know my Qiankyu temple stands in the west of the eastern wasteland. Look at why Tianshan refuses to leave. Tianshan's evil mind steadied Buddha's heart. There are other reasons, seeing nature clearly, knowing oneself, cutting out demons, and practicing Buddhism. There is no need to covet red dust. The monk squeezed the beads and closed his eyes. Thank you, Abbot, for pointing. The Buddha folded his arms and bowed his head slightly. He naturally understood the meaning of hosting. Ellipsis, ellipsis, ellipsis. Above the Tianshan mountains, in the white snow, Ye Fuxian and his team walked down the mountain at an extremely fast speed. Not long after, I reached the mountainside and saw a desolate body sitting in front of a white snow rock, covered with a layer of white snow, pure and flawless. Outside the body like snow, there were pure and flawless eyes. It was Hua Kunking, she was waiting here. The magic bird can find itself, and Ye Fuxian can naturally see everything in the Tianshan mountains. When he stepped forward, Ye Fuxian took off his white robe and put it on Hua Kunking's body. The weather is cold. Ye Fuxian smiled at Hua Kunking. Hua Kunking's pure and immaculate eyes looked at the clean eyes, which were a pair of beautiful eyes. Thank you. Hua Kunking whispered softly. Ye Fuxian smiled and turned to leave. He knew the meaning of Hua Kunking's words. Liang Xiangshu. Nan Yu smiled, glanced at Hua Kunking, and whispered, too bad. He thought that Hua Kunking must have been insulted by Duao. It is a pity that such a pure and beautiful woman is cheap. Duao is cheap, her heart is a little shaky, and beauty is always fun. Chu Chang glanced at Hua Kunking sympathetically, and then the group continued to walk down the mountain. After they left, Hua Kunking's body was shocked, and her white arms looked as white as snow, weak and boneless. Obviously Ye Fuxian knew that her clothes had been partially destroyed. He wore Ye Fuxian's white robes on his body, and he did not hesitate to avoid suspicion. Then he followed the footsteps of Ye Fuxian and others and went down the mountain. At this point, they walked directly from the side of the mountain, then jumped down and flew directly into the Tianshan mountains. At the foot of Tianshan mountain, the camp seems to be very orderly at this time. There are three main battlefields in the void. The strong camp is barren, and watching is strong from a distance. When Ye Fuxian jumped from the Tianshan mountains, they saw the battle there. Elder brother, second sister, third brother. Ye Fuxian's eyes froze instantly, and then Qin Yu and others were also seen. His face became extremely cold instantly. The people of the Qin dynasty actually launched a siege on the brothers and sisters in Tianshan. Duao stared at the void, then looked at Hua Kangking behind him, showing her a faint smile. Hua Kangking saw the same, her eyes were very cold. It doesn't matter. The Buddha's eyes flashed. He glanced at Hua Kangking, and he couldn't help but put on an attractive look. Is there a story about Tianshan that is impossible? In addition, Hua Kangking was wearing Ye Fusion's clothes, plus the fact that Hua Kangking was deliberately hiding the Tianfu situation in Tianfu Tian, which made the Buddha very aware of the strange thing. Could there be an interesting event at the peak of Tian Shan? Kangking. Yu Nanshan glanced at Hua Kangking from afar. Looking at Hua Kangking's clothes, she showed a strange color. Go and catch Ye Fusion. Qin Yu, who was fighting against Jiu Dongyu, shouted loudly. In the void, a strong man with a sweeping array flashed, and headed straight for Ye Fusion. Seek death. Zhu Jui, who was fighting, threw a long whip, forced Hua Zongju back, and then turned into a residual image, heading straight for Ye Fusion. Hua Zongju raised his hand and grabbed the huge palm print directly onto a figure and crushed it, but he discovered that it was not Zhu Jui's real body. This made Hua Zongju show a strange color, looked at the strong man who was heading towards Ye Fusion, and shouted, "Be careful." His voice dropped, Zhu Gavi's figure came over, and a whip swept across the sky. Chapter 385, Revealed. The long whip in Zhu Jui's hand swept the void, and the strong man's face turned towards Ye Fusion suddenly changed dramatically, and his body quickly retreated. The whip swept the void, almost to the extreme, and the brilliance of the thunder that penetrated the whip seemed to be a sharp knife to cut through the void. Slap. The whip was thrown directly at the person's body, and with a scream, everyone was horrified that the strong figure of the prince was cut by his body directly under the whip. The whip was like an indestructible weapon. The person's body was thrown out, Zhu Gavi's body turned into a ghost image and continued to go towards Ye Fusion. At the same time, the Swordmaster also cut the terrifying sword to retreat from the Cloud Swordmaster and the overgeared King Palace Lord. His body retreated like a sword. As for Jiu Dongyu, he would withdraw from the battlefield. Qin Yu doesn't have the ability to catch up at all. Soon, the battlefield was separated, and Zhu Jui, Dao Sheng, and Jiu Dongyu stood in the void in front of Ye Fusion, preventing the Qin and Donghazong dynasties from approaching. Donghazong's people were in no hurry to continue fighting, and both Hua Zongju and Madame Yusio looked at Hua Kangking and said, King, come here. Hua Kangking stepped forward and went to Madame Yusio. Hua Zongju husband and wife looked at the white robe Hua Kangking was wearing, showing a touch of strange color. Madame Yusio shouted, King. The meaning of investigation appeared in his eyes. He had seen before that this white robe was Ye Fusion's clothes. Now Ye Fusion has no robe, apparently, he is wearing Hua Kangking's body. Nan Feng, Chu Chang and others looked at Hua Kangking and felt humiliated. Hua Kangking was afraid that she couldn't say it, which was unbearable for any woman. As for Dao, his face was cold, his bathing flames were shining, and the flames burning in his eyes seemed to be sneering. Father and mother, let's go back. Hua Kangking suddenly said, this is indeed impossible to say, not only her famous festival, but also how did she explain Ye Fusion's clothes for her? Say Ye Fusion saved him. It was tantamount to ruining Ye Fusion. The people in Wangzhou know that Ye Fusion has done the magic bird. Therefore, Hua Kangking hoped for a truce at this time and returned to explain to her parents. Come back. Hua Zongju showed a strange color, and said, later, you take Kangking to the side. Returning to the matter of Hua Kangking, the urgent task now was to finish this battle. The strength of the three disciples in the hut is too terrifying. If they really let them go, the consequences would be unthinkable. He naturally understood that if they gave more time, the three Archon really stood at the pinnacle of the eastern wasteland. Qin Wang was eager to take action, also taking this into account. Hua Kangking Mei looked at her father, in a dilemma, said that Ye Fusion saved her, maybe killed Ye Fusion, not to mention, her parents wanted to kill Ye Fusion. As for telling his parents that Ozu almost insulted him, what was the result? His parents were fighting against the power of the desert nation. The end of it could lead to the collapse of Donghazong. Hua Kangking's pair of pure and neat eyes now revealed the meaning of struggle. I don't know what to do. Qin Yu is also looking at Hua Kangking at this time. Even wearing Ye Fusion clothes, it seems that this woman is not as pure as she shows. Her sister Qin Mengruo married Dong Hua Zong Qian Shan Mu and was killed. What are you doing? Actually, he hid Ye Fusion Tianshan's situation in the sky. It seems that some things they didn't know happened in Tianshan last year. However, Qin Yu did not blame Hua Kangking at this time, and then settled the account. Now he still needs to use the strength of the Hua Zongju couple to deal with it. At this time, in the direction of the Qiankyu temple, the Buddha seemed to be at a stalemate when he saw the people. He looked at the strong man in the desert state and said, "Didn't you set foot in the Tianshan mountains?" The people in Wangzhou turned their eyes, looked at the Buddha, and just listened to him continue, "There are two people who have been to Tianshan mountain for guidance. They should not go up. We were attacked by a magic bird," said Nanfang. Magic bird. The Buddha revealed a strange color, and he looked at Ye Fuxian, and saw Ye Fuxian looking at him too. His eyes showed a coldness. At this time Ye Fuxian suddenly knew who said the secret. He never thought that it was the Buddha of the Qiankyu temple. He should have guessed something. "I understand." The Buddha retracted his eyes, folded his arms, recited the Buddha's horn, and then was silent. "What do you mean?" Nan Yu asked. "Not to mention," Buddha shook his head. Nan Yu frowned, and Ha Lan from Taishuanshan also said, "If you know anything, just say it. If you don't believe it, you will be remembered and hated. The little monk is too shallow to bear." The Buddha shook his head. Empty. The abbot of the Qiankyu temple looked at the Buddha. Deav stepped out and walked towards the Qiankyu temple, followed by Jinwu, the three-legged god, and the powerful fire religion. Looking at the Buddha below, Duao asked, "Speak, I promise no one can move you." "Abbas won't let me speak." Buddha still shook his head. "If I say so, I'm afraid the abbot will blame me. How can I train in the future? You can follow me to Wangzhou and join my practice of the sacred fire," Duao said. The Buddha looked at the others, and when Nanfeng came, he said, "I promise, no one will dare to touch you." The Buddha nodded slightly, and then bowed to the abbot of Qiankyu temple. "The abbot, the monk doesn't say slank, the disciples will tell the truth." After saying that, he looked at Duao and the others, saying, "There is no magic bird in the Tianshan mountains. Are you blind?" Nan Yu said coldly, "He was attacked by the demon bird at that time and was not seriously injured. Qiankyu temple has stood in the western region for many years, and has seen Tianshan mountain. No one knows Tianshan better than Qiankyu temple. This place only has the meaning left by the magic birds. There is no magic bird. If you don't believe it, you can ask the abbot." I suddenly fell on the abbot, only to see the abbot's hands crossed, reciting the Buddha's name, disappointed in his heart. "Old monk," Nan Yu asked, looking at the abbot. "Seeing Tianshan can see clearly, now it seems empty, you already know your heart." Abbas said. The Buddha nodded and said, "Disciples know." "That's all, you go," said the abbot. "Thank you for your abbot's fulfillment." The Buddha bowed, and of course he knew his heart. The more he cultivated, the more carefully he looked. The Buddha said that all sentient beings are the same, where there is the same, and why the dignitaries worship the audience. For him, Buddhism is nothing but the pursuit of power. Currently, the Qiankyu temple has no ambitions. Apart from today's eastern wilderness, the Qiankyu temple is no longer worth nostalgia. Buddha said that his opportunity had come now. "Let's go," the abbot said loudly, then turned around and left with the people from Qiankyu temple. Many people glanced at the Buddha. The Buddha was very talented and could easily read the essence of Buddhist scriptures. But it seems he's also good at hiding himself, unfortunately. When the people in the deserted area saw this scene, they understood that the Buddha was right, and Duo said, "Continue." "I said last time that not only Hua Kangking but Ye Fuxian set foot on Tianshan mountain. In fact, beside the two of them," Buddha continued, "Ye Fuxian stepped on Tianshan mountain and killed Qin dynasty. King Li has fallen into a situation desperate and has no fighting ability. He was chased by Hua Kangking, and Ye Fuxian's guardian was the rest of the same disciple, brother, and monster, Black Wind Carving. Black in order to protect Ye Fuxian, he turned into a demon bird, injuring me and Hua Kangking, and then flew to Tianshan. After that, Ye Fuxian went to Tianshan with the rest of his life, and Hua Kangking continued to follow." The Buddha slowly opened his mouth and said, "If you don't believe me, you can ask King Li's father, King Yu, who told you that Hua Kangking went to Tianshan. Of course, you can also ask Hua Kangking, but I guess she and Ye Fuxian there must be a story in Tianshan, otherwise the dress will not be worn on him." Dao's face instantly turned pale blue, as did Nanfeng, Ninu and the others. When they heard Buddha say, they believed most of them, because there is no magic bird on Tianshan mountain. Where did the magic bird come from? "The magic bird saved Hua Kangking," Duo whispered. Nanfeng and others looked sharper and everything suddenly brightened. Suddenly, magic birds appeared on Tianshan mountain, and they saved Hua Kangking, and then Ye Fuxian put on a suit for Hua Kangking. It was ridiculous that they used to think that Ye Fuxian was just a fragrant and precious jade. It seemed that they were too naive and were applauded by a young man in the eastern wasteland. Extraordinary. Nan Yu clapped his hands, turned around slowly, and turned his face to where Ye Fusion was. Really amazing. Take them to the Tianshan mountains, then let the magic birds attack and injure them. No wonder they confuse them. Dao's eyes were even colder, showing his thoughts. The demon bird wanted his life. Maybe Ye Fusion didn't dare to kill everyone, but if he killed one, and he was with others, no one would doubt Ye Fusion. Unexpectedly, I almost fell to the east. Ye Fusion did not look at them, his eyes were so cold that he looked at the Buddha. The Buddha said these words, all the truth was revealed, and it was impossible to hide it anymore, and his heart was confused. Zhu Gehui Jiu Dongyu also looked at the Buddha, looking very cold, but at this time the Buddha had set foot in Jinbu 3 feet. Following the duo, he rebelled against Qiankyu Temple, only to see the opportunity to seize this opportunity. Left Donghang and headed to Araju to train. You persuaded me to come to Tianshan under tremendous pressure, and then the demon bird attacked and wanted my life. Nan Yu smiled as he looked at Ye Fusion, but his smile seemed a bit cold. You're serious? Nan Yu's eyes flashed in his eyes. The powerful people of various powers in the desolate state walked towards Ye Fusion, and Nanfang also asked, I don't think you got the ruins of Tianshan Mountain. It seems to underestimate you. What did you get on Tianshan Mountain? Chapter 386, Are you worthy? Hearing the words of the Buddha and the interrogation of the people from Wangzhou, many eyes were on Ye Fusion at the foot of Tianshan Mountain. I really didn't expect that Ye Fusion actually stepped on the peak of Tianshan Mountain and got the ruins of Tianshan Mountain. Ye Fusion did it for hundreds of years. Such talent, unfortunately, life is not the right time, and now the desert powerhouse is coming. The Buddha said this, Ye Fusion is afraid that it is dangerous. How to refuse? Tianshan is very calm at this time. Madame Yu Xiu looked at Hua Kangking and asked, what happened to Tianshan? After hearing the words of the Buddha, he naturally guessed that Ye Fusion and his daughter might have a story. Hua Kangking lowered her head and whispered softly, someone in Tianshan wanted to wrong me, and Ye Fusion saved me. Who? Madame Yu Xiu looked cold. Mother, are we not going to participate in this matter? Hua Kangking Maimo looked at her mother again. Now that the situation is getting more and more complicated, he doesn't know what Ye Fusion will face, but he only hopes that his parents will not face him. Ye Fusion, if he is caught in this storm again, Dong Hazong is really dangerous. Mom, these things will not be discussed for now, but the people in the thatched hut will not kill, and the woman will know the consequences. King Yu stepped forward and spoke, his eyes glanced at Hua Kangking. Madame Yu Xiu looked at King Yu with a cold gaze. If not King Yu, how could his daughter Hua Kangking go to Tianshan? Not to mention the danger. Today, his daughter was saved by Ye Fusion, but he owes Ye Fusion a favor. Then, Madame Yu Xiu looked at Duo again. From their previous conversation, she concluded that it was Duo's attack on her daughter. Lu Nanshan looked extremely cold, and his body seemed to be filled with terrifying flames. Sovereign, madam, I didn't know that this kind of thing would happen, but it has ended, but fortunately, the young girl found nothing. King Yu Chuaning said, the strength of the desert country can easily solve the eastern desert. Kacha. Master Hazong holds the scepter of the earth, and the blue tendon is exposed. As Lord Suzerain, a gigantic figure in the eastern wasteland, his daughter was humiliated today. You can imagine his current mood. Sovereign, the overall situation is the most important. First determine Ding Dong Hung. Now Ye Fusion and them must die. King Yu continued to spread the sound, then waved his hand at others, and stepped forward, towards Ye Fusion and the hut. Moreover, at this time the 4 thatched hut disciples were surrounded in the area near Tianshan. At this time, Ye Fusion looked at Nanfeng with a smile, he turned and walked towards Tianshan. After walking to the edge of Tianshan, he turned and smiled at Nanfeng, what did I get in Tianshan? What are you doing? Everyone heard Ye Fusion's words for a moment, then laughed, completely naive. A man guilty and guilty, don't get it. Stupid. Nan Yu's glance glanced at Ye Fusion, isn't that important? He sneered forward, walked towards Ye Fusion, and said, you have no right to the ruins of the Tianshan mountains. You can honestly explain, give up everything, and make a living. Is that true? Ye Fusion looked at Nan Yu and said, but I said that you will believe, don't you have to deal with me then? There doesn't seem to be any difference. I can still give you a chance to join my Nanshanfu. You follow me and you will become a general of Nanshanfu in the future. You can't blame everything in the past. Nan Yu walked in front of Ye Fusion, as if he was Ye Fusion's gift. When I saw Nan Yu step forward, the strong people in Nanshanfu guarded against the sword sages and stepped forward to form a siege trend, but forgave them for not daring to do so. Ye Fuxian got the ruins of the Tianshan mountains, who can take care of it? Zhu Hui looked back at Ye Fuxian and Nan Yu, with a look of disdain on his face. Nan Yu might think he is smart, but who is his younger brother? He still doesn't know. Nan Yu approached subconsciously, and wanted to take the young master, kidding. Follow you. Ye Fuxian looked at Nan Yu with a smile and said, you are worthy. Nan Yu hesitated when he heard Ye Fuxian's words, and then the smile in his eyes became even brighter. On him, an extreme sharp breath possessed him, and his body seemed to be covered with a layer of silver armor. He stretched out his hand and suddenly the silver spear condensed and gave birth to a cold light. At this moment, Nan Yu became very eye-catching. I can give you one last chance. If you miss it, it will be gone. Nan Yu laughed. Ye Fuxian turned around with a smile and walked towards Tianshan. Nan Yu's body flashed, and suddenly turned into a silver lightning, killing Ye Fuxian's back. No one else wants to see this scene. Nan Yu should not have any tension when he wins Ye Fuxian. When King Yu saw this scene, he smiled. Now, when the army of the barren country has to deal with Ye Fuxian, how can the thatched hut stand still? It seems alive this time. Perhaps, the people in Wangzhou will do something for them. Yes. The silver spear exploded into the air like lightning, killed straight through the void. Ye Fuxian didn't look back, he didn't look back, and stepped on his feet. Ye Fuxian's feet seemed to have a bright light, and the storm that came from his feet covered his whole body. Oh, his body seemed to turn into a residual image, a ray of lightning, and lightning remained in the void, leaving a straight purple line, a silver spear stuck in the air, and Ye Fuxian was standing on his Tianshan mountain. On the stone wall, then slowly turned around, looking at Nan Yu. Lightning. Jiu Dongyu's eyes lit up. The young master's talent is really great. The teacher taught him a very short time, and Lei Yingbu is already very skilled. He also practiced the thunder shadow steps, knowing that the footwork of the combined martial arts was not easy to practice. Ye Fuxian's conclusion about those moves to dodge the opponent's attacks was clearly already very skilled and could only be very brave to use them freely. Nice footwork. Nan Yu glanced at Ye Fuxian, and then his body shot again, turning into a straight silver line, like a silver light, instantly killed. At this time, a crackling sound came out, with Ye Fuxian as the center, and golden vines appeared in the sky and earth around him. They turned into lightning and headed straight for Nan Yu. The speed is amazing and gives people a feeling. It was like countless golden spears shooting out. What's even more terrifying is that this golden cutting weapon turns like a tendril, covering the sky and changing direction at will. Spells, threads of death. Nan Yu's body was forced to stop, silver spears danced, silver light curtains appeared around his body, and the vines that killed him were wildly smashed. His hand movements were extreme. Cut in panic. However, everyone found that the vine seemed to have no boundaries, covering the space and killing Nan Yu. What kind of spell is this? The strong people in the desolate state revealed different colors, especially Nanfang. Nan Yu's strength was clear, Tianjiao's character in Nanshanfu, and cultivation status was higher than Ye Fuxian's, although it was all the next day position, but Ye Fuxian's first order celestial position. In a low-level situation, Ye Fuxian could release a spell and block Nan Yu or even be trapped in it. What does this mean? At this time, Nan Yu was also really angry. The silver light soared high, and went straight to the clouds. Every shot that passes seems to cut through the void, and the power is incredible. When he slashed his spear on the vine, he looked sharp. On the sharp blade, a crisp sound was made. A dazzling brilliance suddenly bloomed from behind Nan Yu, and a life and soul method blossomed out. It was the figure of a war god holding a spear. The spear danced, and the world reverberated. Nan Yu also danced the spear. Broken, the thread of death spell couldn't get close to it. Kill. Nan Yu flashed an extremely sharp silver cold mang in his eyes and pupils. He turned into silver lightning, pierced the void, and shattered the slain spell vines. Later Tianjiao was forced to release the soul and soul. The people in Wangzhou did not doubt the victory or defeat of the battle, but they were still somewhat surprised by the process of the battle. They looked at Ye Fuxian standing on the stone wall, and saw Ye Fuxian's hand stretched out at this moment, and a bright golden purple lightning flashed in the palm, trembling, like a purple gold thunder chain, his body bathed in this golden purple thunder, the sacred. The world around him changed color, and the people under Tianshan looked at this scene in shock. Many people in the golden purple thunder have never heard of it. Is the defense really that strong? Ye Fuxian's eyes became very strange, and the purple light of lightning flashed in the pupil's eyes. Spiritual power was combined into the spell, And then, it was extremely bright. The golden purple thunder crossed the void and turned into a real lightning strike directly on the silver body who had been killed. Nanyu screamed in anger, and the silver spear straightened the killing spell. The spell instantly swam in the spear and then hit it. At this moment, Nanyu's body seemed to be electrocuted and violently shook, only to feel that his body was shaking violently, and his mental strength seemed to be attacked by lightning. Still the fusion spell, the name of the spell, the god of thunder. Boom boom boom. When Nanyu was numb, a purple gold lightning blast passed through him, banging furiously. Nanyu's body continued to tremble, the whole person was numb, crackling came out, and a dead raw the thread descended, binding his body on the around him, and pulled towards Ye Fusion, floating in the void. The eyes of countless people froze there, and they looked at the scene in shock, especially the strong people of the desert state. Nanyu, who was defeated with great shame, did not have the strength to resist, but he was a level higher than Ye Fusion. Do you want me to follow you? Ye Fusion looked up, looking at Nanyudav who was trapped in the void. Nanyu's eyes stared at Ye Fusion, killing the terrifying sky, and a brilliant light appeared, but when a crackling sound came out, the winds threw him against the Tianshan mountain wall, and the loud sound made him fierce. Crushed on the mountain wall. Proud. At this time, the powerful figure of the Nanshanfu prince stepped out, descended in the void, and raised his hand to hold Ye Fusion. Ye Fusion raised his head and looked at him indifferently, and spat out the words, "Go." Clang. The word rolled, the bell rang, the terrible invisible storm suddenly destroyed everything, and a loud bang, the figure of the powerful prince was pale and instantly flew out. Chapter 387, Doom of King Yu. This terrible storm not only drove the prince away, but also swept across Tianshan, sweeping through endless space. Many strong people flowed with terrible brilliance, their hands stretched out in front of themselves, but they still couldn't help but snort. With a sound, his face was pale, and the people above the prince stepped back. In the deserted camp, Yinglong roared, Jinwu Changming was three-legged, and the vast space shook him. For a long time, the bells were gone, sweeping towards the land in the east and west of the desert. Then they looked at Ye Fusion, and saw the figure standing proudly in the void, and looked around the crowd. At this time, where would people not understand? The bell was controlled by Ye Fusion. The bell at the feet of Tianshan last year in the same way, he really controlled the meaning of Tianshan. Fire God, the stunned Lord Hu Qiang slightly lowered his head, then slowly raised his head, looked at Ye Fusion, his face was very embarrassed, a rotating character shook his back. The rest of the barren powerhouses were all sharp-edged, and indeed, as Buddha said. King Yu's face was embarrassed at first, and then a cold smile appeared. In this case, no one can guard Ye Fusion, and he will die. No matter what happened today, he could not escape. With his strength, he is not yet qualified to control Tianshan, these barren countries will not let him go, and the huts can't hold him back. Ye Fusion's eyes fell on his brother and sister, and then Zhu Gehui looked at him with a smile and said, "Brother, you can." "Brother, accidental injury, accidental injury." Ye Fusion saw the sister's smile shivering, he didn't mean it. "At the feet of Tianshan last time, I said which bastard did it. I didn't think it was you." Zhu Jimmy looked on with a smile, although he also guessed something, but he was really surprised at that time. But of course he didn't really blame Ye Fusion. "Sisters, if you see your brothers and sisters as children, you may as well leave the cottage later. Brothers and sisters, please come back." "I will not come back later," Ye Fusion said. Both Dao Sheng and Zhu Gehui looked at each other and looked at Ye in surprise. Fusion then understood what he meant. The boy was worried about the hut involved, and wanted to draw a line. After all, the current opponent is not the Qin dynasty, but the people in Wangzhou have to deal with it. Ye Fusion understands that the brothers and sisters are afraid that they will not stand idly by, and it offends the troops in Wangzhou. Zhu Jui heard Ye Fusion's words flash and walked towards him with a smile. "Older brother." Ye Fusion shouted and saw Zhu Gehui smile and stretched out his hand, then pinched Ye Fusion's ear and twisted, and laughed. "Your son said it again. Brother Shi, I was wrong. Ye Fusion is crying, after all, it is an adult. In front of so many people, is this really that good? The perfect picture is completely shattered. Good." Zhu Jui then let go, and rubbed Ye Fusion's head again. "I won't say that again in the future. Ye Fusion is really going to cry, can sister give me some face?" I don't know when Dao Sheng and Jiu Donglu both came to Ye Fusion. Even though they didn't say anything, when they stood there, they showed their position. Ye Fusion felt a warm current in his heart, happy to have such a brother and sister. "Let me go." An indifferent voice came out of time. Ye Fusion turned his head. Nanyu's body was tightly bound to the mountain wall by a death-wrapped spell, unable to move, bound like a big character. His eyes were very gloomy and dead, looking at Ye Fusion. In front of people all over the world, he was deeply humiliated. Do you know what you're doing? I'm from Nanshanfu, Wangzhou. Nanyu's voice was very cold, and the descendants of the Nanshanfu family were humiliated in a place like Donghanging. Nanshanfu based. You asked me why I didn't wait for you on campus. Do you understand now? Ye Fusion looked at Nanyu scornfully, and said ironically, a wild person like you is really vulnerable. What's the point of beating you? Unless it threatens to remove you from the family, do you know what shame is? Nanyu's restrained body shivered slightly, his face was very gloomy, and Ye Fusion's words were undeniable. Enough. At this time, Yingfeng said behind the dragon, let him go. Ye Fusion looked at Nanfeng coldly, and ignored him. You may want to train in this mundane world. This mundane world is a sectarian power. You have good talent and you must have a place. Chu Chang suddenly said in the world, inviting Ye Fusion. Ye Fusion glanced at Chu Chang with a smile, and he couldn't help but enter the worldly practice. Isn't it mutually exclusive? Thank you, Chu Fairy, for your good intentions, but I still like the power I have now. Ye Fusion smiled, the Tianshan mountain ruins are my chance and of course mine. Can Chu Fairy take someone away? Chu Changmi's eyes stared at Ye Fusion, too naive. The ruins of the two emperors, which may be one of the 10 famous songs, can Ye Fusion keep it, even if he agrees to leave another army in Wangzhou? How could Ye Fusion think so simply? How about you? Ye Fusion saw another power, and everyone looked at him. No one said. If you don't go, I have to hold back. If I rob, then I have reached a dead end in Tianshan. Ye Fusion asked. He simply hated that his strength was too low, otherwise, if someone coveted his body and wanted his life, he would have killed him on the spot. He naturally understood that he was unable to use his spirit. If he was alone, he would run. However, there are lodges, academies, and family members. How could they escape? Naturally, he couldn't just think for himself. He can attack with the meaning of Tianshan, but there is no point in leaving Tianshan. You just have to go to the hut, and he will definitely come back. At this time King Yu said, looking indifferent, Ye Fusion got the ruins of Tianshan and wanted to be here. It was difficult to kill him, so he deceived the strong man in the deserted state and went to Shushan. The impact of the bell on the people of the heavenly realm is not too great, and it is enough for the people of the heavenly realm to win it. Three-legged Jinwu said to the Buddha. He had just felt the sound of the bell just now and was shaken, but he could still handle it. There are many strong people in the desert. There is no problem in winning Ye Fusion. As for the prince, there are only 3 people on Ye Fusion's side. How to compete? If Ye Fusion started the suppression of the bell with the intention of communicating with Tianshan, all the princes were injured together, including his brother and sister. Also, King Yu blinked. Defeat them. Duao said coldly, and then the strong people walked forward, and the prince and the strong people walked at the same time. Sister Shi, I really want to kill the war. Ye Fusion said to Sister Shi. I also. Zhu Hui glanced at the crowd, very cold. Then kill King Yu first. Ye Fusion said, looking at King Yu as if he saw the dead. Okay. Zhu Hui nodded. Ye Fusion looked at King Yu's side, and then looked at the patriarchal couple Hua Zong and Hua Kangking, and when they saw Hua Kangking's beautiful eyes looking at him, he said, Father and mother, can't you join the war? King, you retreat. Hua Zongju sighed, he also wanted to retreat, but now, there is no way out. Wangzhou was also involved in the battle in the eastern wasteland. The fate of Ye Fusion and the thatched hut was already ruined. The future of the eastern wasteland should belong to the Qing dynasty's army. How did they retreat at this point? King Wang and King Yu, can they be liquidated? Sovereign, after the war, Donghangzong united, Donghazong became the first Donghangzong. King Yu said, knowing that Madame Yu Xiu had an opinion of him. Hua Zongju nodded, then stepped forward, and the mighty strong man surrounded the 4 Ye Fusions. Under the Tianshan mountains, many people stared at this scene, and their hearts rose and fell. Brother, if there is a place to offend, the younger brother must be unintentional. Ye Fusion told Rao. Zhu Jime looked at him, and came. Don't be so loud. Zhu Gehui glared at him. Sure. Ye Fusion trembled with a smile, then his body slowly rose into the air, his eyes suddenly became very cold, and he looked at King Yu. King Yu, Tianshan is your burial place. His words fell, his thoughts moved, and he communicated the whole mind of Tianshan. At this time, the Tianshan mountain soared into the sky, the snowflakes were more pressing, and the endless blizzard was rolling towards the space where Ye Fusion was. Then, everyone faintly felt the terrifying aura of heaven and earth. The snow in the entire Tianshan mountain seems to have turned into an aura, piercing through the heavens and the earth, and every snowflake that floats towards them seems to have an aura in it. He can use Tianshan's aura. Everyone's face is ugly. At this moment, they all knew that it was impossible for someone in the heaven realm to kill Ye Fusion. On Tianshan mountain, suddenly endless golden plants swept over, extending from the entire sky, spreading wildly, extremely fast, covering the sky and blocking the wind and snow. Ye Fusion stood there, his handsome eyes were tightly closed at this time, and he felt everything calmly in Tianshan. King Yu and the others looked up at the sky, then said, "Retreat." The chirping sound continued, and endless vines blocked Tianyu. King Yu turned around and wanted to evacuate, but at this time, a loud sound came out, and the Tianshan bell sounded again, sweeping over. At this time, everyone only felt that an ancient bell that suppressed everything appeared in their minds. Yukong's body shuddered and hummed, King Yu's face was as pale as paper. Kang! Another bell rang, and in his mind, a huge and endless ancient bell fell from the sky, shaking downwards, and speed, he vomited blood, his face was pale. Not only him, the powerful prince of Tianshan mountain, many people have a bloody mouth, and the big figures in the desert state are very embarrassed. Dao Sheng, Zhu Gehui, and Jiu Dongyu sat in front of Ye Fusion with their eyes closed. They didn't have to worry about anything else, they just needed to endure this power, so they felt better. King Yu sighed angrily, and his body was full of golden light, and he wanted to leave. Clang, clank. The bell continued, and he continued to speed blood, and his body fell down, but at this moment, endless vines fell from the sky, rolled straight onto his body, and rolled over to Ye Fusion's side towards Tianshan Go, no. At this moment, King Yu suddenly developed a strong fear, and his body was beyond his control. Chapter 388, Kill the Ring. King Yu felt his body rushing towards Tianshan, his hands, feet, and neck were all wrapped in vines, twisting his body towards Tianshan. He was really scared. Father went to the lodge to hold Du in the academy. As long as they killed a few people on the sword, they were named king from the east, but he never dreamed that Ye Fusion could not only motivate Tianshan, the bell, and also the power of Tianshan. I will not die. King Yu's mind gave birth to a strong idea of survival. His body shone with an incomparable golden light, destroying everything. At the same time, the armor on his body released light, blocking the spell's attacks. The golden vine was cut off by the mighty Jin Yi. King Yu gave birth to a glimmer of hope, but he heard a clank. Alas, his blood speed, and the glimmer of hope that had just risen was immediately extinguished. Ye Fusion, this completely ruined his life and killed his life. The fear in King Yu's heart became stronger and stronger, and then a loud explosion, he felt his body crash into the mountain wall, the vine turned into a terrible sharp knife and stabbed his body, but at this time King Yu was all over his body. The bathrobe armor glowed, blocking the vine's attacks. Clang, clank, clank. The bell rang flatly, the endless Tianshan space trembled. Bastard. Stop. The figure of the prince in the desolate state lay on the ground one after another, vomiting blood, and the majestic Yinglong body fell gently to the ground, blood flowing from his mouth, and the three-legged Jinwu also lay weak. On the ground, fiery color blood flowed out. Too bad, all the strong characters in Tianshan have been suppressed. Instead, those who were weakest could still stand intact. They saw the princes who fell in the snow and they didn't know what they were thinking. The bells still echo, ringing in their minds. In Tianshan, Ye Fusion controls the bell to kill everything. Too cruel. At this time, King Yu, like Nan Yu, is tightly bound to the mountain wall, his breath is weak, and he can even be described by his breath, the brilliance of the magical instrument is dim, and his mental strength is slow, and he can't use the aura to communicate with the magical instrument. Covers the whole body. The sharp golden vine touched the skin around King Yu's neck like a sharp blade, cold and piercing. King Yu, looking weak, looked at Ye Fusion and whispered, "Let me go. Just leave it." Ye Fusion laughed. When King Yu planned to destroy the Liu kingdom, he had thought about who to let go. The Qin dynasty is brutal and inhumane, so such a power is destined to sink in the long river of history. King Yu, you will not be alone. Ye Fusion's words fell, a sharp knife pierced his neck, blood slowly flowed out, King Yu's eyes flowed open, regaining strength as if returning to the light, staring at Ye Fusion. I don't want to. He growled with depleted energy, and then his eyes gradually disappeared, his breath disappeared, and he was glued to the top of the mountain. The snow and ice on Tianshan mountain enveloped his body. Only a moment later, King Yu turned into an ice sculpture and froze on the mountain wall of Tianshan mountain. Liu Guo, why not be willing? Ye Fuxian muttered. Beside him, Nan Yu's body trembled with fear, and the lowly ancestor he hated. At this moment, the temperament he showed at that time made him feel a little scared. The meaning of Tianshan swept the powerful people around Tianshan and nailed the supreme prince to Tianshan. Ye Fuxian slowly turned around, and under Tianshan mountain, countless eyes looked at Ye Fuxian's figure, and he unleashed a terrible storm. He owned the ruins of the Tianshan mountains, forged the meaning of the Tianshan mountains, and Prince King Yu of the Qin dynasty fell in the Tianshan mountains. Besides, I'm afraid it's not just King Yu from the Qin dynasty. At the foot of the Tianshan mountains, in the snow, the rulers of the floating sword ruler, the king of the Tenshan king, and the Dongba ruler, all turned pale and ugly. At this moment they were all weak and miserable. They knew very well that since Ye Fuxian was able to kill King Yu, they were too. Above the sky, golden vines covered the sky blocking the sky, and there were no snowflakes in the sky. Ye Fuxian glanced at the Lord of the Cloud Sword Sovereign and Lord of the Palace of the Suspended King, and then the vines rolled towards them. Oh! The Cloud Sword Sovereign's ruler gathered his last strength, and the body turned into a sword light that tried to escape. With a clang, the bell rang, and the body of the Hai Yin Shui ancestor fell directly, weak and desperate. The vine rolled over, instantly covering his body, then rolled into his arms, rolled the famous sword into the air, and crossed a beautiful bow. The sound of chirping, the master of the floating sword, the giant figure of the eastern wasteland, his neck cut off by his own sword, like King Yu, he died in the mountains. No, I'm willing to take orders at the thatched hut. The owner of the palace of the suspended kings looked down at Tianshan and looked at the handsome figure hovering above Tianshan. He expressed his willingness to surrender. At this point, he just wanted to live and survive. Don't insult the thatched hut. Ye Fuxian glanced at the others with disdain, slashed at the lightsaber, and spilled blood on the snow. Everyone's heart went numb. This is the third big man, the top big man Donghang, all of them all died in the hands of Ye Fuxian. Kill the ring. Who would have thought that these giants in the eastern wasteland would become a road of death like this? Shake the lightsaber and spin, heading towards the Fuyongjian sovereign pair, as fast as lightning. Master Hua Zong paled, the couple together and sighed silently. Fuyong Janzong always wanted to be the first in the world, so he cooperated with the Qin dynasty, but who would have thought that the disciples of Kotang were so extraordinary that they did not die in the hands of the sword master, but would die in the smallest of Kotang. Dreamy, right? The quivering lightsaber turned into cold lightning, killing him in midair, but at this moment, Qian's shadow was blocked in front of them. Kung King. Master Hua Zong shouted loudly, and it was Hua King who was standing in front of them. I saw Hua King's beautiful eyes looking at Tianshan mountain at this time. The trembling sword descended like lightning, with incomparable sharpness. Oh! The sword is full of air, and Hagwang is reflected on Hua King's face. Her eyes are always open, Mimi doesn't blink, she doesn't go to look at the sword, she just looks at Ye Fuxian. King, let go. Hua Zongju said. Hua King was still blocked in front as if she had not heard. I died for them. Hua King looked at Ye Fuxian. On Tianshan, you didn't hit me. You released Tianshan and you kept the secret for me, so I saved you before, but your parents are responsible for something, Ye Fuxian said. Hua King is not the same as the Qin dynasty in Dong Hazong, so he saved him, but the Hazong master slaughtered his brothers. I know, so I want to change it, Hua King whispered softly. Can't replace it, Ye Fuxian said. Liu Guo's matter, they don't participate and don't know. That is the meaning of the Qin dynasty. If you are determined, then kill them together. Hua King's eyes closed slowly, and tears flowed from the corners. Not because of the fear of death, but because of some things. He thought of the snow in Tianshan, and the wonderful piano music in Tianshan. If you know today, will he shoot Ye Fuxian in Tianshan? After Tianshan, will he keep a secret for her? Little brother, I'm sorry. At this time, next to Ye Fuxian, Dao Shang whispered with his eyes closed. When Ye Fuxian heard Dao Shang's words, he looked in the direction where Hua King was, and said, what will Hua Zongju do in the future? I will retire, but ask about Donghang. Hua Zongju said. If that can't be done. Ye Fuxian said again. They can't do it, I'm dead. Hua King opened her eyes and looked at Ye Fuxian. Ye Fuxian looked at those resolute eyes. In the next moment, the vines rolled over with the lightsaber and whistled. After all, they didn't kill the beast King Dongba and Madame Yusio, but went the other way. That direction was the direction where the powerful fire teachings in Aral Prefecture were located. Buddha's face suddenly changed, and he said, "Help me." He blinked, hiding behind Duo, who was being taught by the flames. Hagwang's shining lightsaber came over, and Duo looked at Ye Fusion and said coldly, "How dare you kill him?" The vine rolled onto the Buddha's body and tied him directly, then rolled towards the void. "Let me go." Buddha's face changed greatly, and he looked at Ye Fusion. The golden vine carried him straight into the void, facing Ye Fusion. Ye Fusion looked at him with a gaze and said, "Do you want to enter the desert state?" The Buddha wanted to use it as a stepping stone and step into his life to practice in the desert. "I don't agree," Ye Fusion said softly. Behind the Buddha, the sword of light followed the vine, and a slam directly pierced the Buddha's head and cut. The Buddha's eyes were still open, the blood continued to flow, the vine disappeared, his body fell into the sky, his heart was endlessly cold. Isn't this the chance? The arrival of a strong person in a deserted state, leaving Kyangkyu Temple in the eastern desert, training in a deserted state, and pursuing strength, are all so perfect. It just so happened that he knew Ye Fusion's secret. But why is this the end? Why, he will die. The Buddha said that sentient beings have reincarnation. Where is reincarnation? The light of death went out, and there was no one else in the world. He was so short in his life that he had talent in the sky, and before the light that belonged to him bloomed, he died. He's not reconciled. But no, he's still dead. His body fell in the snow, just like the Lord of Clouds and Clouds. They didn't want and didn't expect the end of his life to be like this. Sorry, personal grudge, nothing to do with you. Ye Fusion said to Duo. His tone was even, but Duo's face was ugly. Personal grudges have nothing to do with him. It hit his face. However, how indifferent Ye Fusion's voice was, he didn't think of it at all. Of course, Ye Fusion didn't think so. If not for the power behind them, Ye Fusion would have directly started the killing ring. The people had offended and killed the Buddha. Need to consider her feelings. Better to take orders from each other. Chapter 389, Alive, right. Tianshan suddenly became very calm, and the vines that flew across the sky gradually disappeared after killing King Yu and the other characters. Snowflakes fluttered, with a hint of coolness. Many people stared at Ye Fusion's figure. At this moment, the handsome young man seemed to be the only one in the entire world. King Yu's death, Cloud Sword Sect Master's death, and King's Palace King's death, the Dongba Zongba sovereign couple announced that they would no longer care about Donghang. The final battle of Donghang ended with an unexpected ending. It was a little dreamy, but very surprising. After this battle, who can compete with the thatched huts in Donghang? Of course, this is based on the premise that there are no variables in desert states. But now Ye Fusion not only killed King Yu and others, but also offended the great figures of Wangzhou, tortured Nanu, killed the Buddha in front of the Duo, and pressed all the powerful princes of Wangzhou to the ground. The breath is weak, and Yinglong and Jinbu are 3 feet down as well. You can imagine how badly Ye Fusion offended people at this time. The bell finally stopped completely, and the lingering echo gradually dissipated. Many people have the opportunity to breathe. The figure of the prince stood up one after another, with a weak breath, and looked at Ye Fusion coldly. Although Ye Fusion did not try to deal with them, but this was not a delusion, and they still made them very angry. Somehow they were so sad. I can imagine what their mood was like. Aren't you going to let go? Nanfang said to Ye Fusion. At this moment, his voice was not as strong as before. He just saw everything in her eyes. If Ye Fusion was anxious in this Tianshan, their ending would be no different from King Yu and the others. Ye Fusion froze, then glanced at Nan Yu, who was still tied to the mountain wall, and smiled. Sorry, I forgot about you. In other words, golden tendrils exploded like lightning, and shot straight at Nan Yu's head. Ah! The sharp knife-like vine continued to dilate in his pupils. Nan Yu's body trembled violently, and he couldn't help but panic, afraid to close his eyes, and the bound body shivered and trembled. He only saw how Ye Fusion killed those people earlier. When he saw the vines killing him, he naturally thought Ye Fusion wanted to kill him. Boom! The golden vine stabbed directly next to Nan Yu. The stone wall exploded, and then rolled towards his body. Ye Fusion said, "What's wrong with you?" Nan Yu opened his eyes, and then saw that the vines on his body had disappeared, and Ye Fusion looked at him innocently. Seeing Ye Fusion's gaze, how could Nan Yu not understand that he was being deceived? With a click, Nan Yu's eyes were extremely cold, and his body was filled with breath, but when he saw the golden vines around Ye Fusion's body swaying, his heart sank and there was a sense of weakness. It's inevitable that we might get hurt a little bit by accident. I believe that Tianzhou in Nanshanfu will not be so calm. Ye Fusion smiled and said, "Please. Nan Yu had the heart to kill at this moment. Seeing Ye Ye's playful eyes, he turned around and returned to Nan Feng's side. This time, they admitted it. Aren't you really thinking of entering my worldly practice? At this time, Chu Changmi looked at Ye Fusion and said, you can rest assured of my sincerity, and with your talent, you will definitely receive attention when you practice in this world. Thank you, Fairy, for your good intentions, Ye Fusion smiled. Okay. Chu Chang looked at Ye Fusion, and said secretly that it was a pity. Turning around, Chu Chang left with someone, not just him, people from all major powers left Tianshan one after another. Who can win Ye Fusion in Tianshan? Ye Fusion watched the figures gradually disappear and looked indifferent. He knew that the problem was far from over. Don't want to. At this time, Zhu Ji Huaimi's eyes opened beside him, smiling at Ye Fusion. A little. Ye Fusion said, he has the ability to guard everyone in Tianshan, but he can't move, he can only let go, of course, not reconcile. If you don't want to, then you will become strong and take precedence over everyone. Naturally, there is no need to worry about that. Zhu Jui laughed, and the things in the world were such a cruel reality. People in the desolate state can use various methods to intimidate Ye Fusion, but when Ye Fusion can kill them, he can't. Nan Yu was so arrogant, if he wasn't supported by Nan Tianfu, what else would he do in front of his little brother? Zhu Gehui looked at the handsome young man in front of him, his smile was bright, and the young master was so intelligent and so talented that one day he could make the people of the desolate state look up. Well, I'll work hard. Ye Fusion nodded with a smile. If he had been left alone, he might have left the people of the deserted country together, but he didn't. Alright, shall we count? Zhu Jui looked at Ye Fusion with a smile. Ye Fusion blinked, then looked at the snow in Tianshan, and said, Sister, the scenery of Tianshan snow is very beautiful, just like your sister. Zhu Jui was still looking at him with a smile. Big brother, 3 older brothers, are you okay? Ye Fusion said again. Ellipsis, ellipsis, ellipsis. Above the book mountain, the first mountain, the pavilion. The 2 figures sat in the game. In the void, strong like a cloud. There were strong from the Qin dynasty and strong from the academy. They both looked at the 2 nervously. Now the match between the King of Qin and Mr. Du seems to be entering a critical moment, especially Mr. Du, Tianshan battle, if you want to retreat from the whole body, it is difficult. Does this mean war broke out in Tianshan? The 3 great disciples of the lodge can actually abandon their Qin Yu. King Wang's son, his eyes fell on Du's body, his eyes were very sharp. I look at the current Master Du with a faint smile, light and gentle, as if everything is in his hands. This feeling made the King feel very bad. Is Mr. Du kidding? King Wang laughed. Du shook his head, I usually don't laugh. Perhaps, Mr. Du may not have read it properly. King Wang said again, and then the chess piece in his hand fell. With this chess piece falling, the pieces connect again and again. The situation on the chessboard changed color, and the faintness turned out to be amazing. Trends. Life is like chess. Taking a step back and widening the sky and retreating doesn't mean cowardice. It's just an attitude towards life. Mr. Voice Du sounded flat, and he didn't hesitate anymore, and fell again. Beside him, Dean Xiao was shocked inwardly. He did not expect that this person's chess skills were so beautiful that he would show his life attitude with hope. Previously, Mr. Du was always backed out, destroyed, and defended. At this time, Du's offense suddenly changed, and the situation suddenly changed. It seemed that the situation was reversed in just a moment, and the situation was corrected in an instant. Sharpen it, crush it all, flatten it all. Sweat dripped from King Wang's forehead, and his heart was faintly restless. Life is like chess is like life, chess. Mr. Du made him feel scared. This is not only a game of chess, but also a game in the East. The King squeezed the pieces and looked at the chessboard in front of him, but he couldn't stand it for a long time. He doesn't know how to play. This game has already been decided, so we don't have to play anymore, Du whispered. I don't believe it. The King looked extremely cold and continued to fall, as if struggling to die. Du shook his head and then sat down. The King's face turned pale. At this time, there was a strong breath from the direction of Shushan Hoshan in the distance, and there was liquor, and it seemed that a quarrel broke out. I saw several figures rushing towards the side in a panic. Dean Xiao frowned. It was the place where the entrance to the Academy's arid ancient world was located. Your Majesty, Prince, the spirit mark is broken. A voice came, like a hurricane, into King's eardrums. His hands were stiff in the void, and his body trembled slightly. His son King Yu is dead. Boom. In the void, everyone who was brought by the Qin dynasty shaking with heart, Prince Qin Yu, died. What does it mean? The Tianshan battle would most likely fail, but how was this possible? Suzerainian Donghua couple, Fuyun Sword Suzerainty, Sudden King Diandian, Qin Yu, Lu Nanshan are all top characters, and they carry a lot of sage-level magic instruments. How can they be defeated? The King took a deep breath, closed his eyes, then opened them, and the chess piece in his hand fell weakly on the chessboard. Looking up, the King looked at the old man in front of him and said, Master Du has already laid down Tianshan. So, who is the sword? The King pointed to a sun on the chessboard. He didn't understand why he lost. Is it important? Mr. Du shook his head. Well, Shushan, this good trend, who will dominate it? The King pointed at the chessboard ice road, and he slowly stood up. A terrible breath emerged from him. Not only him, behind him, the two old men of the Qin dynasty also released a very strong breath. The breath of several people enveloped the vast expanse of the Book Mountain, and in the void, the strong people brought by the Qin dynasty all released a very terrible breath, coercion. The academy disciples, the disciples of the sacred mountain of the sword, and the disciples of Wanguzong all left, releasing a strong breath, and resisting the mighty oppression. Still obsessed? Asked Mr. Du. Is there a retreat? The King picked up the fallen chess piece and placed it in the place where the carcass died and was carried away by the current. I teach several disciples in Shushan, do not ask for names or benefits, nor do I have the ambition to unite the East. At this time, Master Du sat quietly, as if to himself, I hope to influence a few people and pass on my ideas. Gradually, it will affect the entire Donghang. Why is it so difficult? I don't care about your idea. The world is remote that Du doesn't understand spiritual practice. Today, I want to see if Master Du understands spiritual practice. Du looked up and looked at the King, and said softly, Live, isn't this good? Chapter 390, Reason to Worship. Live, isn't it? A calm and indifferent voice fell on the King's ears, making him feel cold. Even if Mr. Du did not let out a breath at this time, but the simple sentence still had such power, which made King Wang feel the power of fear. Nurse. Dean Xiao looked to the side, and looked at Mr. Du. Impossible. Master Du rubbed his head, seemingly depressed. Suddenly, Long Yin's voice came out, shaking the earth. In Shushan, many academy students trembled violently, and they felt their blood fall. Long Yin's powerful voice came from the body of the King. Out of the eruption, a terrifying dragon shadow rushed out of his body, shaking, and the terrifying golden dragon claw smashed straight into, and arched towards Du's head. The distance between the two is too close, the distance is so close, the power is so violent, and the person who shoots is the King. Anyone under the Sage Kingdom might not want to survive under such a surprise attack. All eyes were on Shushan looking at Mr. Du at this moment. His heart skipped a beat. Du is not dead, the golden claw remains in the void. On the terrifying dragon claws, the dragon shadow continuously shot out, but the terrifying power of the attack failed to kill Du. The room seemed deserted. Du stood quietly. A terrifying dragon shadow covered his body, but was blocked by an invisible brilliance. The flowing brilliance didn't seem to have the power to break through. What's more, this terrifying Wangwa slightly wrapped around the body of the King, completely covering him. The King was shaking all over, shocked, scared, confused. Sage, the King's heart sank completely. He looked at Du, only to see that the person's expression was as calm as ever, staring at him innocently and quietly. King Kun's eyes continued to change, and he began to say, Why is the world remote that Mr. Du doesn't understand spiritual practice? How many people dare to say that they understand spiritual practice? Mr. Du answered. That being the case, why don't you ever shoot? King Wang still didn't understand. He thought he had put enough pressure on him. If Master Du really had absolute power, why didn't he move his Qin dynasty? He never thought that Du really didn't understand the practice, and didn't dare to underestimate the existence of a character like Jiu Dongyu, who taught the sword. However, Du's humility and patience gave him the illusion, although Du will cultivate, but maybe only comparable to Dean Xiao, or even stronger, but definitely not a sage. Otherwise, why don't you shoot today? Isn't he shooting now? Master Du said softly, and then, the bright brilliance rolled Kun's body into the void, and behind him, a horrible ghost appeared suddenly. His eyes and pupils seemed dead. Grey, the horrible dead Grey is heading for Mr. Du. At this moment, a terrible illusion appeared in Shushan, as the shadow of a death dragon appeared, covering the sky and covering the space above the academy. Many people trembled inside, watching the horror scene that covered the sky, and many people felt scared. The two old men from the Qin dynasty also came to the King of Qin, and they all released the same strength, as if they were gods of death. A dense face of dark air appeared above the sky, facing Shushan. Who moved my children and grandchildren? The cold voice came out, and everyone in Shushan felt the cold. King Keen, his descendants. It is rumored that the Keen dynasty opened the ancestral tomb. Is there any determination left by the ancestors? Terrible, everyone seems to be shrouded in death, like death. Is this the true power of King Khan's arrival at the academy? Your descendants are unfilial, I will clear the portal for you. Master Du looked at the imaginary shadow condensed in the void, and said lightly. An endless stream of dark air flowed in the void, and a pair of terrifying death pupils stared at Mr. Du, and then dark air rushed in frantically and covered every direction of the academy. Du stretched out his hand towards the void. The next moment, a huge palm appeared in the vast expanse of Shushan. This palm stretched across the heavens and the earth, covered the entire Shushan, and an endless dark air blew in the palm of his hand. On the other hand, I saw the sharp sword in the enormous palm of the hand, and the flames that burned the sky. The palm stretched wildly, and it was still expanding, covering the entire sky. The palm is like the world, the 5 fingers are like the 5 mountain peaks, and the palm sword is like the heavens of the heavens and the flames that envelop the sky. It was like burning the magic fire of the world. The meaning of the sword and the power of the flame are integrated into one. Everyone from the Keen dynasty is shrouded in the palm of the hand. No. The Keen king and the powerful people of the Keen dynasty developed endless panic in their hearts. They went upstairs and wanted to escape, but they found that the palm world was like amplifying space. Their bodies could not move at all, it was an incomparable gravitational pressure on their bodies, and their bodies not only failed to escape, they even drowned. It seems that the only thing that can solve everything is still strong. In this world, it is still the biggest fist. Mr. Du seemed to be laughing at himself, his palms were slightly clasped, and above the sky, a large palm print ripped. Sir, pardon. Someone asked for forgiveness. But at this moment, Du did not show any signs of mercy. He took the large palm print directly, and with a loud bang, everything was gone. The palm print turned into an aura, the sun fell down, everything in the sky disappeared without a trace, there was no death stream, there was no strong Keen dynasty, only determination remained, everything else, turned into everything the dust of history. That grip, the Keen dynasty, was completely reduced to the history of the eastern region. In Shushan, countless people trembled slightly, and their hearts broke the waves. Nothing could describe the shock in their hearts at this moment. The huge palm that covered the sky and the sun was an era. Is this the real Mr. Thatched's cottage? The rumors do not understand the practice, but seek Mr. Du, the best student in Donghanging. Many eyes looked towards the figure of the old man, with endless admiration and enthusiasm, whether they were students in the academy, disciples in the sacred mountain of swords, or those in Mizuki, their mood was the same at this moment. Mr. Sao Du is the first person in Donghang, the first person without tension. At Shushan, the old man retracted his palm and felt countless enthusiastic gazes. He sighed and looked at his older brother Dean Xiao. Hey, why is it so hard to keep a low profile? Ahem. Dean Xiao's mind was instantly pulled back, and he looked at the figure in silence for a while, and saw Du standing with both hands in his hands, and left casually. This bastard, but also my heart, Dean Xiao cursed. Ellipsis. On the way from Tianshan to Shushan, a group of people walked in the sky, and they were Sword Saint, Zhu Hui, Jiu Dongyu, and Ye Fusion. Their Dosheng departed for a while and was ready to return to Shushan directly. Brother, will there be nothing in the hut? Ye Fusion asked, worried, since King Yu was here to deal with them and the King didn't show up, he might go to Shushan. Besides, he was also offended. Strong state. Relax, there is nothing wrong with the teacher, said Jiu Dongyu. Ye Fusion's eyes flashed, and then he asked again, what is the realm of the teacher? If she believes the guy doesn't understand practice, he's an idiot. Hein. Jiu Dongyu said directly. Ye Fusion's eyes lit up slightly, the old man looked worried. I am a little worried about the teacher, Dao Sheng said suddenly, the arrival of the barren country, the Qin dynasty is pressing hard, the teacher is afraid that he will take pictures. The second and third sisters were silent, which made Ye Fusion have a strange look. Since the teacher is wise, why worry? Little master, do you know how we were accepted as disciples by the teacher? Dao Sheng asked Ye Fusion at this time. Ye Fusion shook his head. I am an orphan. Many years ago, when I was young, I wanted to worship the little martial arts middle school knife because I was too talented to resist. Even the mountain gate was not qualified to set foot. Some people pointed at the foot of the mountain to practice. Shibi said to me, if I can write on a stone wall one day, I will put me in the mountain gate. I took a knife and tried for 3 months, and finally carved a very shallow stroke. After exploding, the old man who passed by told me that a fool like me is not suitable for spiritual practice. It is better to follow him, and I get discouraged and follow the old man. Dao Sheng recalled his childhood with a gentle smile. He would never forget his experiences all those years ago. Lately, my brother became an Eastern swordsman. Ye Fusion blinked. This is really a very simple story. Brother Ershi, right? Ye Fusion asked curiously. Forget it. Zhu Gehui said, Ye Fusion embarrassed. Your second-ranker sister ran away from home and was chased by her family. The teacher blinked. Your second-ranker sister said that she knew there was a good place for her family and she couldn't find it, so she fled to the desert. Dao Sheng smiled. This. Ye Fusion's face was black. What about the 3 brothers? Ye Fusion asked again. Your third brother is even more modest. When the teacher took the second sister out to play, it was said that after your third brother saw your second sister, he followed the teacher and refused to leave. Dao Sheng Dav. Ye Fusion was a bit messy at the moment. Are these really the 3 big disciples in the thatched hut? The reason for this worship is so touching.